Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Linder Lesser, and I'm a member of the Executive Board of the Jewish Federation of the Berkshires. I welcome you and thank you all for being here today. The Holocaust was a state-sponsored, systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jewry by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1945. 6 million Jews were murdered, and millions of others were targeted for destruction because of their racial, ethnic, or national associations. The history of the Holocaust offers us an opportunity to reflect on the moral responsibilities of individuals, societies, and even governments. Our program today, Jewish Survival in Albania and Kosova, offers a unique glimpse of the Albanian people's moral courage and cultural ethics, and shines a light on the capacity and obligation we all have to stand up and speak out and help those who are still being persecuted in our world today. Today we welcome Leka Reznicki and Agim Alichkai, descendants of courageous Albanian righteous Gentiles, together with Congressman Joe and Shirley DioGuardi and Fatun Bizlimi, to tell this inspiring and relevant story. On behalf of the Berkshire Jewish community, I want to thank Joe and Shirley for their collaboration and work, together with Jared Kaufman, our Federation Director, and Rabbi David Weiner of Knesset Israel, in developing today's program. I also want to thank the Jewish Women's Foundation for sponsoring the Clarksburg Middle School students' participation and their exhibition of Righteous Gentiles, which will be on view during the reception after the program. Finally, I want to extend a very special thank you to Ron and Karen Retner for their generous underwriting support to bring this remarkable program to the Berkshires. Today is the first time the exhibition of the Jewish Rescue in Kosova will be shown in the United States. Imagine, in our small community. We're deeply grateful and honored for this wonderful opportunity. Ron and Karen are part-time residents of Lenox and active supporters of the Berkshire Jewish community. As members of Knesset Israel, their leadership gift to the congregation's capital campaign has helped create a beautifully renewed spiritual space for KI members. Ron is a successful business executive, developer, and community leader, and a visionary advocate for the advancement of higher education and social justice. Under his leadership as director, the Morris B. Retner Foundation has funded scholarships, research, civic projects, and university facilities since 1975. He served as president of Retner Management Corporation since 1976 and as managing partner of Barron Associates since 1980. In 2014, the Albanian American Civic League and Foundation appointed Ron as their Jewish Affairs Advisor in recognition of his important contribution to bringing international attention to the unique role that Albanians played in saving every Jew who either lived in Albania or sought refuge there during the Holocaust. Please join me in welcoming Ron Retner.
Good afternoon. I am proud to have become acquainted with the Albanian rescue of the Balkan Jews and to have played a small role in disseminating its message to the world. I want to thank Derek Kaufman and Jeff Cook for their enthusiastic roles in making this event happen. I first want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the families of Leka Reznicki and Akim Alikaj for their most important roles in saving so many Balkan Jews, and for Leka and Fatan for traveling halfway around the world to be with us today. It's been an honor to come to know these outstanding young men. I want to acknowledge Joe and Shirley for their role in covering this story and for making this world a better place and I want to thank Rabbi Wiener for his support and for my wife Karen for her perpetual support. The Albanian rescue of its Jewish population, as well as the thousands of Jews rescued from neighboring Kosovo and Macedonia, is a message to the world that genocide should never be tolerated, and a prime example of a small nation standing up to tyrants in bold defiance to protect a persecuted minority. The Albanian message resonates in our world and in our time, which cavalierly witnessed the Bosnian, Cambodian, Rwandan, Syrian, and Sierra Leone genocides. The world callously ignored the ruthless, senseless, indiscriminate slaughter of entire populations targeted only for their ethnicity, religion, tribalism, or nationalistic hatred. At this very moment in the Middle East, hundreds of thousands of Muslims have been slaughtered, and hundreds of thousands more are on track to be slaughtered due only to their differing interpretations and historic practices of the same broad religion. To my mind, nothing could be more senseless than the killing of innocents for no reason except for their religion, ethnicity, or historic hatred. Oppressed by the Ottomans for 500 years, Catholics, Orthodox, Muslims, and Jews lived side by side, tolerating each other's religious beliefs and practices. The Albanian example so sharply contrasts with the Christian-Muslim bloodletting in countries like Lebanon, Egypt, Turkey, and Syria. In defiance of the Ottoman rule, the Albanians survived by forming their own national code of conduct, ethics, rules, and laws, independent of and in the historic outgrowth of its national character and honor of the Albanian practice of protecting all Albanian nationals from outside persecution and oppression. Numerous psychological studies were undertaken during the Nazi war tribunals. The perpetrators of genocide tended to be rigid, intolerant, remorseless, cruel, violent, angry, filled with hate and irrational hatred, which enabled them to direct and target their hatred and violence on innocent, defenseless targets without remorse, compunction, or conscience. Having endured 500 years of Ottoman oppression, the Albanians first defied the Albanian occupiers and then the Nazis. With its long history of defiance, the Albanians had the national character and collective courage to stand up to the Nazis in protecting its Jewish citizenry from persecution and slaughter. The Albanian rescue of its Jews is a message to the world that each of us must stand up against intolerance, hatred, and those evil forces fomenting senseless persecution and wanton killings of innocents. I have been repeatedly asked why, as an American Jew whose family was not directly impacted by the Nazi Holocaust, have I invested tens of thousands of dollars in disseminating the story and message of the Albanian rescue of its Jews. I feel strongly that the Albanians should be honored and recognized for their national heroism and individual courage in standing up to and defying Nazi brutality. As American officers during World War II, my father and uncle both witnessed Nazi genocide and brutality and saw firsthand the abject horror and inhumanity of concentration camps. My father's brother, an engineer, was captured at the Battle of the Bulge, blowing up a bridge, slowing the German advance. Jewish POWs were segregated into a Jewish stalag and made into slave laborers at a coal gasification mine and Bergabad Orb, a subcamp of Buchenwald, in defiance of the Geneva Convention. As an intelligence officer, my father helped liberate the Ohrdorf concentration camp. I abhor the senseless, wanton, indiscriminate persecution and slaughter of individuals and groups victimized for racial, religious, ethnic, or tribal or nationalistic reasons. I am therefore hopeful that the Albanian message resonates in some small way in a world that turned its back on Nazi genocide and the myriad genocides of our time. I pray that the world comes to its senses and suppresses the senseless, needless hatreds which all too often resulted in wholesale slaughter and genocide. Each and every one of us takes comfort in the safety and security being an American affords us. Yet not a day passes without news photos of mass genocidal killings in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and we live our lives and tune out the tortured, ghastly suffering of our fellow humans. Yes, Bashar al-Assad is a modern-day Hitler, and no world leader has the guts to stop his onslaught. Chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ed Royce, tells the story showing pictures his father took as a GI liberating Dachau to Palestinian Authority President and Holocaust denier Abbas. There is no doubt that the axis of evil, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, and Syria, have their sights set on a modern-day Jewish Holocaust. As an occupied nation, the Albanians could have taken the course of least resistance and turned their back on the persecuted Jewish minority, or still worse, copied the Latvian, Lithuanian, Ukrainian, Hungarian, and Polish nationals who collaborated with the Eisengruppen in mass murdering their Jewish countrymen. The Albanians defied the Nazis, risking life and limb as a matter of honor not to turn their backs on a people in peril. Yes, the Albanian example is one of collective courage, national character, and selflessness in defying genocide, and is a message for our time that should resonate in putting an end to the brutal, senseless mass murders being perpetrated in the name of nationalism, religion, ethnic hatreds, and religious exercise of, and ruthless exercise of political power in our time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. That was very educating and a great way to kick us off. Our next guest, the Honorable Joseph J. DioGuardi, was the first member of Congress to bring the issue of the Albanian rights in the Balkans to the attention of the U.S. government as a new member of the U.S. House of Representatives in 1986. After leaving Congress in 1989, he founded the Albanian American Civic League and Foundation, where he serves as volunteer president. Joe and his wife, Shirley Cloyes DioGuardi, have worked tirelessly to advance the human rights and freedom for Albanians in the Balkans. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Joe DioGuardi. Thank you. Get out of your way.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon. Nice to see a full house here. This is going to be a wonderful trip for you. My role here is minor compared to what you're going to see from Leka and from Fatan and from Agim. But when you look back, when I look back, the word discovery, it's a beautiful word. In three ways I can simplify my role here. One, I get to Congress, a poor kid from the Bronx. Father had a grocery store. Both parents are from Italy, but my father, believe it or not, spoke Albanian. You might say, well, how could that happen? Well, 550 years ago, the Ottoman Turks overran Albania, and tens of thousands of Albanians only crossed 40 miles from the closest point of Albania. You'll see a map upstairs into Italy. Today, you have 51 Albanian-speaking villages in southern Italy, mainly in the Calabria region. My father's is one of the most famous, called Greci, right near Naples. But there's another discovery that I had. I ran for Congress thinking that I would help save America. Why? I'm a certified public accountant, well-trained in private accounting, in government accounting, and I knew, coming from one of the world's largest firms, having participated in the bailout of New York City with Lazard Frères in 1975, that we had kind of a fraudulent accounting system in the federal government where we don't record all of our debts. And I tried to go there to change that. That was my reason for going to Congress. And people thought I was crazy to run. How are you going to make it? You're never a politician. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. I said, well, I'm going to give it one try. And I just squeaked in a district that was very difficult. But the one discovery was that I was the first certified public accountant ever elected to the U.S. Congress. And today, there's only maybe a few more. You would think more accountants would run. And now you know the problem. Everybody's spending, but nobody's counting. And that's why we have this national debt going up, and most of it is off the books. Because all they're talking about is the cash, not the unfunded liabilities. So why is that important to you? How are we going to be strong for all the people that we want to help in the world if we're not strong ourselves? And that's going to be a big issue in the next 10 years, no matter what your party is. Shirley and I are bipartisan. We represent different interests when it comes to parties, but we get along on almost everything, and certainly on the Albanian issue, human rights, we know what we're speaking about when we go around. This country has become too polarized. Second discovery. My father was alive at the time. He died in 1987. I got to Congress in 1985. My first party as a congressman, Albanians from Kosova, Yugoslavia, were there. And they overheard him speaking to his younger sister in the language that he brought here in 1929. It's the old Albanian language, which is 90% of the current Albanian language. And they couldn't believe it. They ran up to me. We thought you were Italian American. Well, I am. But your father's speaking Albanian. Well, that, we have some kind of a subculture. I'm not exactly sure. My parents weren't really that well educated. In fact, they had basically no education from southern Italy. I was fortunate to get a good education. And they said, no, you're Albanian, and we need you. They lobbied me day and night. They told me about a place called Kosova I never heard of. No member of Congress ever heard of it. Only one that knew it was Tom Lantos, a Hungarian Jew saved from the Holocaust by Raoul Wallenberg, because he was born in Hungary. He knew the Albanian people. So that's what started it. The next thing was a trip to Albania that I was encouraged to take by Congressman Lantos, because I was a member of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus and Foundation Executive Committee, fighting for Soviet Jewry. The issue of apartheid was a big issue back then, and I had a district that had all kinds of people in it. 46 synagogues in my district, by the way, so I had to come up to speed right away on a lot of issues. So the point was that here, Lantos says, Joe, if you ever get a chance to go to Albania, I want to come. And that chance came, and we went there on May 30th, 1990. The place was like North Korea. You couldn't get in, and you couldn't get out. For 45 years, it was its own kind of concentration camp. Many Albanians were killed trying to escape. So when we got there, the communist leader, I'm his leader, didn't want me to bring anybody. But I said I would not come unless I brought a sitting member of Congress. I brought Lantos. In order to ingratiate himself with this great, fine Jewish leader, human rights, you can imagine how far removed Albania was from human rights in those days. He ingratiated Lantos by giving him a file from the communist archives that no one had ever seen, 4 inches thick. Lantos got it, gave it to me. I'm thumbing through it as we're giving one of our speeches, and I'm noticing it, all these clippings, photos, letters, different languages, and it hit me that these were letters from Jews around the world trying to connect to their rescuers. And the communists wouldn't let it happen. They were interested in one thing, their party. They put these letters, clippings, photos in a file. I was the first one to get it. I sent it a week later through my friend Ellie Streit, Wharton School graduate, lives in Israel today, has a second home in Sarasota. Ellie and I have been working for years together, building bridges between the Jewish people in America and also the Albanian people. He brought it to Yad Vashem. They could not believe it, that these people were rescuers that were hidden for 45 years. So this is really what transpired during that time. But what you're going to hear today is another part of that story. And you got to understand how difficult it is for Albanian people, because after World War I, they were artificially divided against their will into 6 different countries, although they live all contiguously. You'll see it on the map upstairs. So if you look at 7 billion Albanians, draw a line around them in 6 different countries, that's the original country of Albania that came out of the Ottoman empire when it collapsed in 1912. Now imagine dealing with political problems, and you have a lot of corruption now in these countries in 6 different places. This is what still befalls the Albanian people, and you can imagine this poor country, one of the poorest in Europe, still has to deal with that, and Shirley and I are trying to help. But how was it that so many Jews ended up in Albania? I never questioned that in the beginning. Now, if you look at the book that's out there right now, Rescuing Albania, you'll see the whole story of Jewish survival and how many of these Jews ended up coming after the burning of the Second Temple and then the Spanish Inquisition. Some were Jewish maidens taken as slaves by the Romans, the ships shipwrecked on the Illyrian, the Albanian coast. Read this book, you'll love it, it's on there. So, how did it happen that where only 200 or 300 families were Albanian Jews, that thousands were in there? Well, this is the story you're going to hear from Leka Reznici and from Aga Malichkai and from Fatan Bislimi. They refused to deal with borders. And the Albanian people, whether in Kosova, Macedonia, Montenegro, northern Greece, Albania, they are the same people. They have this culture called Besa that comes from 1,000 years ago, the Kanun, that if you're my guest in my house or my country, you'd be saved. And we would have to die before you were injured. When people from Western Europe, I know Ron referred to Balkan Jews, many of these thousands of Jews came from Austria and Hungary, and Germany, but they realized they had to get to Albania. But what did they hit in Yugoslavia? They hit Kosova. 2 million Albanians in a province in Yugoslavia called Kosova, and Kosova was occupied by the Nazis, very toxic. While Albania, in the beginning, before Mussolini was killed, was occupied by the Albanians, by the Italians. They were not so bad until Mussolini was killed, and then the Albanians showed their real courage. Now, this is the story you're going to hear today, and I don't want to go too much further than to say that when I was in Albania, I met with Joseph Jakowel, 1991, on my second trip, because now we had elections to bring a democratic government to Albania. And when I met with him, I found out the first time about this Jewish community. And at that point, they were already planning to go to Israel. And that story will be told by my wife, Shirley Cloyes. But part of that was also his daughter, who I didn't meet at that time, and you'll see from the story. But I wanted to, at least at this point, now turn to her excerpts from the speech she gave for us at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in 2013. And if that can be put on, I want you to hear directly from her. She's the daughter of Joseph Jakowel. She arranged with her father for a couple of hundred Jews to go to Israel. She's in charge of the Israel-Albania Friendship Society, as Leka is the Kosova Israel Friendship Society. I want you to see her. She couldn't come here.
You know, you have heard a lot of stories about the saving of the Jews by the Albanian people. But, you know, when I was a teenager and my father used to tell me those stories, you know what? I was a little bit tired. You know, teenager people? And I used to tell them, what are making a fuss about this? You were an Albanian Jew, and you had good Albanian friends. You spoke Albanian. They saved you. What's the big deal? I saw this as the most natural thing in the world. You know, when I fully realized what happened with the Jews, only when I came in Israel in 1991. When we came in Israel in 1991, and many Jews from Serbia, Macedonia, even from Vienna, they heard that the Jews of Albania now they are in Israel. They used to come and talk to us. And I heard such wonderful stories. Each one of these stories is one most beautiful than the other. And of course, I cannot tell you all of them. I'll tell you only one. I met this woman, her name was Mimi Conforti. And she came to me and she said, look, I have to tell you this. I was a small girl. We escaped from Serbia. We did not have documents. We had only forged documents. And the Albanian soldier in the border, he realized that, but he let us come in. And then said, my father, he paid a simple person. He had a donkey, And on the donkey, we put our things and we started a long journey towards the mountains. And we arrived in a remote village, and we found like a hut, yes? And we entered the hut, and there we decided to pass the night. In the middle of the night, we heard somebody knocking on the door. We were terrified. The Germans came. We opened the door, and it was this mountaineer. He didn't say a word. He took a sack of flour. He threw it on the floor, and he disappeared in the evening without telling us our name. He said, this guy, he saved us. And today she told me, I cannot tell who saved us, because all the Albanians, they behave towards us the same way. And today she took my hands and she told me, I can tell you only one thing, all the Albanian people saved us.
Again, let me not hesitate to thank Ron and Karen Retner for all they've done over the years. I've known Ron since I was a congressman. He supported me back in 1984. His father was stepfather was an Orthodox rabbi. That's how we met. And Ron, thanks again for everything. Let me now introduce, and by the way, how did the Jews get to Albania? It was the Albanians of Kosova that formed like an underground railroad like we had during the Civil War here to get them from house to house to house till they got them where it was relatively safe in Albania, okay? Then, let me introduce now my wife, Shirley Cloyes, DioGuardi. She's been the Balkan Affairs Advisor to the Albanian American Civic League and Foundation. She is a former book publisher, a writer, an independent scholar, and a human rights activist specializing in the Balkan conflict. And today she is she's a valuable consultant to Chairman Royce and others in the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you, Shirley, for all the good work you do, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Joe. Can you hear me? It's a pleasure to be here. I also want to thank Derek Hoffman of the Jewish Federation of Berkshire's, Rabbi David Weiner of Knesset Israel, and Ron and Karen Retner for making today's important event possible. You've just listened to Felicita Yakovell on screen, and I'm sure you have a sense of her passion about the Albanian rescue of Jews during the Holocaust, and she has an equal passion about Israel. But what you would not know is the way in which her father and mother raised her and her sister in communist Albania in a way that put their lives at risk. At school, every day, they were fed with communist propaganda, but at night, her father, who said that he refused to raise two daughters as slaves, educated them secretly at home in the Jewish tradition, in several languages, and in Western history, literature, and culture. If caught, the entire family would have been executed. And without a doubt, this background led Felicita at the age of 33 to make a trip to Greece when the country's last dictator felt pressured to loosen the travel restrictions. So she left on the pretext of visiting family in Greece, but she went straight to the Israeli embassy in Athens. The ambassador was amazed to learn about indigenous Jews in Albania, and he helped Felicita fly directly to Jerusalem by not stamping her passport, where she presented the list of all known Jews in Albania to Yad Vashem. This laid the groundwork for the exodus of 300 Jews from Albania to Israel in 1991. And she and her father ultimately founded the Israeli-Albanian Friendship Association in Tel Aviv in 1992, a few months before his untimely death. This is the second of three historical developments without which we would not all be here today. The first you've already heard from my husband, the discovery of the Albanian archives hidden for 45 years that were handed to him and the late Congressman Lantos and then authenticated by Yad Vashem. The second development leading to the revelation is the role played by Felicita Yacoel. And the third development is Joseph Yacoel's handing over to Joe DioGuardi his manuscript entitled Jews of Albania, and in turn to Jewish-American philanthropist Harvey Sonner, who would turn Joseph's treatise after his death into a paperback book entitled Rescue in Albania, the one that Joe mentioned is available here today. He gave the distribution rights to the Albanian American Foundation. Then he financed the travel of 16 Albanian rescuers to Israel in 1993 to receive their recognition from Yad Vashem, and as of 2017, 70 have been recognized. There's definitely not enough time to review the outcome of the historical convergence of these three events and the work of the Albanian American Foundation in drawing international attention to the Albanian rescue, but I want to highlight a few key moments. In April 1994, after a private tour of the newly established U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., with the Kosova government in exile, Joe and I were shocked to discover the Albanian rescue was completely missing. And so we lobbied for its inclusion, and in February 1995, our foundation would celebrate the addition of Albania to the Righteous Among Nations section in the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, and three Jewish congressmen, Ben Gilman, Tom Lantos, and Gerald Nadler, helped to make this a reality, and they spoke at our foundation-sponsored ceremony commemorating the installation. Then after the war in Bosnia ended in 1995, Serbian dictator Slobodan Milosevic turned his attention to Kosova. With the Kosovar Albanian population at risk of extermination, our Albanian American Civic League and Foundation distributed Rescue in Albania, beginning with Jewish leaders and communities who understood before anyone else what was unfolding in the heart of Europe. The unique role that Albanians played in saving European Jewry now began to reach a much wider audience. Our foundation's efforts to expand awareness of the Albanian rescue would then take many forms after that, from congressional resolutions to a 1,000-person event at the Sheraton Hotel in 2005 on the 60th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi death camps, to a trip to Yad Vashem in 2007 for the public recognition of the Albanian role, to a 2012 recognition of the 100th anniversary of the independence of Albania in the U.S. Capitol, and a 2013 event at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in Manhattan, bringing together Jewish leaders, the descendants of Albanian rescuers, members of Congress, and experts on the Holocaust and genocide prevention to reflect on the Albanian rescue. The latter was the direct result of Ron and Karen Retner's attending our foundation event in the U.S. Capitol in 2012 and insisting that the Albanian rescue had to be shared more widely, and it was their vision that has brought us here today. Yes, they deserve another recognition. Thank you. The unique role that Albanians played in saving every Jew who either lived in Albania or sought refuge there during the Holocaust, and we're talking, by the way, about Albanians in every walk of life, from the farmer to the political elite. And as you will hear from Leka Reznicki later, the unique role that Albanians in Kosova played is all still in the process of being uncovered. To understand the Albanian rescue of European Jewry, it's necessary to understand the long history of Albanian religious tolerance and resistance to oppression that made the rescue possible, that both Ron and Joe have talked about today. There's not enough time, of course, to review this history, but I want to give you a few important components. First, Albanians consist of secular Muslims, Orthodox Christians, Roman Catholics, and Jews who have lived side by side in harmony for centuries. You will discover, as we did Albanians are Albanians first. They're people of faith second. The oldest inhabitants of Southeast Europe, Albanians have survived centuries of invasion, occupation, expulsion, and even genocide. Albanians are the descendants of the Illyrians, the core pre-Hellenic population that extended as far as Greece and Italy. During the 6 centuries that Romans ruled Illyria, the Illyrians resisted assimilation and retained their legal norms, their culture, their language. All Albanians were either Roman, Catholic, or Orthodox Christians, except for a small number of Jews, when the Ottoman Turks invaded the Balkan Peninsula in the second half of the 15th century. When the Ottoman Turks invaded Albanian lands, they immediately set out to force conversion to Islam and acceptance of Islamic law, but they largely failed. Until today, Albanians embrace a very secular form of Islam, and intermarriage between Christians and Muslims is commonplace. No sooner did Albanians emerge from 435 years of Turkish domination when the Ottoman Empire finally collapsed in 1912, they then found themselves facing, or battling, I should say, Slavic racism, beginning with the Balkan Wars of 1912 to 1913, in which 500,000 Albanians were killed or died of hunger and disease, followed by racism, forced assimilation, expulsion, occupation, and genocide at the hands of hostile Slavic regimes. Only because of the intervention of then U.S. President Woodrow Wilson was the state of Albania created after World War I. And it was against the plans of Russia and most of Western Europe, but it had redrawn borders that included only half of the Albanian people who had emerged from the defunct Ottoman Empire. As a result, today, 3.5 million Albanians live in Albania, and another 3.5 million live side by side bordering Albania, as Joe said before, in Kosova, Macedonia, Montenegro, southern Serbia, and northern Greece. In 1939, Mussolini's Italian fascist forces invaded and occupied Albania. The German Nazis followed in 1943. The Nazis expected Albania to cooperate with Hitler's final solution, but Albanians refused. There were approximately 300 Jews living in Albania before the war. By the end of World War II, there were approximately 3,000 Jews living in Albania. The fact that Albanians had been isolated from centuries of institutionalized anti-Semitism in Western Europe was a factor in this remarkable record. However, the principal reason for Albanians saving Jews was their history of religious tolerance and religious and interethnic tolerance based on the Kanun, which is a set of customary laws that has regulated Albanian conduct since their Illyrian ancestors arrived in the Balkan Peninsula thousands of years ago, with its underlying code of Besa, emphasizing compassion and tolerance. The Kanun was passed down orally and enabled Albanians to resist and to survive centuries of persecution, from the Romans to the Ottoman Turks, from the Nazis to the communists, and under Slavic domination for almost a century. Besa links personal honor to respect for and equality with others. It also involves uncompromising protection of a guest, even to the point of forfeiting one's own life. That's why the modern concept we know in the West of foreigners doesn't exist in the Kanun, only the concept of the guest. And so, when the Nazis were bent on genocide, it was natural for Albanians to treat Jews as guests who had to be defended, fed, hidden in private homes, and transported to safety whenever danger threatened. It was Besa that underlay the Albanian rescue of Jews during World War II. The task of preventing genocide in our time will be aided by examining why Albanians responded as they did to the Holocaust. While we've made great strides, I think you would agree, in technological advancement in the 21st century, we are woefully behind in moral advancement. While most of Europe turned its back on the extermination of European Jewry, Albanians demonstrated empathy, tolerance, self-sacrifice, and courage. Understanding the Albanian example can strengthen the resolve of peoples everywhere to end mass atrocity, which I believe is the most important human rights issue of our time. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm now very happy to introduce Leka Reznicki. He's the secretary, and in U.S. terms, that's really the chief operating officer of the Kosova Israeli Friendship Association, an organization founded by his late grandfather, Mustafa Reznicki, to document the Kosovar Albanian rescue of Jews during the Holocaust. Leka is the great-grandson of Arslan Reznicki, the first Kosovar Albanian recognized by Yad Vashem posthumously as a righteous among the nations. With the passing of Leka's grandfather in 2008, Leka has expanded the Kosova-Israel Friendship Association's effort to bring international attention to the still little-known Albanian rescue in Kosova through a traveling exhibition. Today's showing, as I think Amy pointed out earlier, is the first time that Leka is presenting the exhibit in the United States. Our Albanian American Foundation has been privileged to know his grandfather and to work with Leka for the past decade. Please give a very warm welcome to a very committed and remarkable individual. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank everybody that came today, and especially I would like to thank Mr. Joe DioGuardi and his wife Shirley Cloyes DioGuardi, Mr. Ron Ratner and his lovely wife Karen for making possible everything, Dara, Amy, Rabbi, and everybody else for providing me this great opportunity to have a presentation in this honored auditorium. My presentation is entitled Uncovering a Hidden History and Legacy, the Kosovar Albanian Rescue of Jews during the Holocaust. As it was mentioned, in 1990, when Albania's last communist dictator, Ramiz Alia, turned over to then Congressman Tom Lantos and former Congressman Joe DioGuardi previously unseen archives about the unique role that Albania had played in saving every Jew who either lived in or sought asylum there during World War II, a potentially lost part of Holocaust history was brought to light. With the authentication of the archives by Yad Vashem a year later, the process of uncovering and documenting Albania's saving role ensued, a process that in the intervening years has encompassed oral history, interviews, and video documentation in the United States, the Balkans, and Israel. The still largely unrecorded dimension of this story is the role that Albanians outside the sovereign nation of Albania in Nazi-occupied Kosova, in particular, played in the rescue. As in Albania, this information was available in records for a half a century, but it was hidden by communist forces in Albania and the former Yugoslavia in the post-war era. In Kosova, the suppression of this information also intersected with a century of Slavic domination over the Albanian majority population and the misrepresentation of their history and culture. Memories of first-hand experiences, photographs, artifacts, and some written records were passed down through private channels of families and trusted friends and are only now being recorded for posterity. Only in the mid-2000s did the effort begin in an orchestrated way to reconstruct through oral history the essential role that Kosovar Albanians played in hiding Jews from the Nazis and securing their safe passage to Albania. Kosova, illegally annexed by Serbia at the end of World War I, was conquered by the German Nazis in April 1941, along with the rest of Yugoslavia. After Yugoslavia's capitulation to Hitler's forces, most of Kosova, with its Albanian majority population, was reunited briefly with Albania, which had been under the control of the Italian fascists since April 1939. Cambridge University professor Noel Malcolm explained this development in his Kosovo, A Short History. Quote, "At a meeting of the Italian and German foreign ministers in Vienna on April 21, it was agreed that the largest part of this Albanian inhabited territory, Kosova, should be put under Italian control and joined to Albania in order to prevent Albanian ethnic irredentism from becoming the driving force of an anti-German resistance. In other words, the Nazis wanted to pacify Kosovar Albanians by appearing to free them from a long history of Serbian oppression. In September 1943, Italy surrendered to Nazi Germany and German troops invaded Albania. Henceforth, the Nazis occupied all of Kosovo and Albania. The political situation in Kosovo from 1943 to the end of the war was extremely complex and dangerous, one in which Kosovar Albanians had to contend with the occupying German army and the infamous SS on the one hand, and on the other, the Serbian nationalists who were collaborating with the Nazis and who had oppressed Albanians for generations. As a result, Jews in Kosovo who had resided there since the 15th century were in great jeopardy, and their Kosovar Albanian rescuers acted on their behalf at enormous personal risk. Like Albanians inside the sovereign nation of Albania, Kosovars acted out of the same moral code in rescuing Jews during World War II that had sustained Albanians for thousands of years. At its core was a precept of BESA, requiring the uncompromising protection of those in need and a long history of interreligious harmony. One of the first recorded rescues of Jews in Kosovo occurred in Pristina, the country's capital, when Serbian authorities complied with Nazi demands to jail 60 Jewish men and prepare them for transport to the extermination camp in Auschwitz, Poland. Spiro Lito, an Albanian doctor who worked at the hospital in Pristina, enlisted the city's mayor to support his rush to save these men. He took all of the hospital's physicians to visit the Jewish prisoners and then declared to the Nazis that the prisoners had contracted typhus and to prevent a widespread epidemic had to be transported immediately to hospitals in Albania. The men were quickly dispatched to Berat, Albania, where Albanian authorities gave them false documents to hide their Jewish identities and then sent them into safe hiding in rural Albanian villages. The issue of whether Kosovar Albanians collaborated with their Nazi occupiers has been the subject of much debate. Although some collaboration took place, as Noel Malcolm has explained, quote, the driving force was neither ideological sympathy with fascism or Nazism, nor any interest in the wider war aims of the Axis powers, but simply the desire of many Albanians to seize the opportunity offered by the collapse of Yugoslavia to gain more power over their own territory and reverse the colonizing and Slavicizing policies of the previous 2 decades. End of quote. For the same reason, some Kosovars were attracted to communism. The Yugoslav communist partisans under General Marshal Tito agreed at 2 conferences in Albania in 1944 to make Kosovo independent as soon as the Nazis were defeated. But they reneged on their promises. After the Nazis withdrew, Tito would declare in 1945 the new political geography and constitution of Yugoslavia, which would place 5 republics and 2 provinces, Kosovo and Vojvodina, under Serbia. The majority of Kosovar Albanians opposed Nazism, and many more than have been documented thus far acted to free Jews. My great-grandfather, Arslan Reznici, was one of the leading members of the Nazi resistance in Kosovo, who devoted 6 years of his life to saving Jews. My grandfather, Mustafa Reznici, an adolescent during the war, assisted him, and for the rest of his life, he preserved and carried on the history of our family's role and that of other Kosovar Albanians in rescuing Jews during the Holocaust. The narrative of Kosovar Albanian resistance to the Nazis actually begins with my great-grandfather Arslan Reznici. He was a merchant in Jakova, in Kosovo, who later moved to live and work in the city of Deccan. As far back as 1931, he made a living as a trader in Albania, Macedonia, Turkey, and Greece, and his principal colleagues were Jews from Skopje, Macedonia, and Thessaloniki, Greece. Chief among them were David Cohen and Rafael Natan. In 1939, on the eve of World War II, when their lives were clearly at risk with the rise of Nazism in Europe, David Cohen, Rafael Natan, and another colleague, Solomon Conforti, reached out to my great-grandfather for help. They asked to come and live with our family in Deccan if we could provide them with accommodation and security. My great-grandfather brought Cohen, Natan, and Conforti and their families into his home in 1940. Later, after Yugoslavia capitulated to the Nazis in 1941, my great-grandfather continued to hide them and eventually helped them flee to Albania. Bearing in mind the fact that our family owned a lot of land but nevertheless had a modest home, my great-grandfather made an agreement with Rafael Natan, David Cohen, and Solomon Conforti to build a new stone house next to his own. The house was to accommodate their immediate families and closest relatives, and later many other Jews seeking refuge. Not only did my great-grandfather shelter and protect these families, but he even hired a professor, Berkshire Castrati, to come to the house clandestinely to teach their children. In early 1941, 3 members of the Reznici family died from an epidemic of typhus that broke out in Kosova. My grandfather, Mustafa Reznici, was among those who contracted the disease. Coincidentally, that March, a Jewish physician, Haima Bravanel, was mobilized in Skopje, Macedonia, in a Yugoslav army unit. Traveling by train to Peja, a town in west of Kosova, Dr. Bravanel ran into Solomon Conforti, also a Jew from Skopje. Conforti immediately informed my great-grandfather about the presence of Dr. Bravanel in Kosova and the prospect of his treating his son Mustafa. Conforti convinced Bravanel to accompany him to Dečan to treat my grandfather, who at that time was under the care of 2 Serb doctors who thought that he was suffering from malaria. When Dr. Bravanel arrived in Dečan, he quickly discovered that my grandfather had typhus and fortunately was able to save his life. Mustafa, who would go on to assist his father in the rescue of Jews, would pass the family story down to his son Adnan and to me, Adnan's son. Later, when Dr. Bravanel and his army unit were captured by the Germans in Kosova, my great-grandfather went looking for him, found him, and helped return him to safety in our family home in Dečan. During the 5 months that he spent there, Dr. Bravanel treated the local Albanian population and refused to take any recompense for his services, saying that he lived and ate for free at the home of Arslan Reznici, and therefore there was no need to pay him. In time, Dr. Bravanel wanted to return to his wife Berta and family in Skopje, and my great-grandfather accompanied him on the return trip to Macedonia. As word spread about the Reznici family sanctuary, other Jewish families approached our family for help, and soon 40 families from Macedonia, Bulgaria, and Serbia were sheltered in our house, sometimes for days, often for months, until my family was able to organize safe passage for them to Albania. To camouflage their presence, all of the Jewish families were given traditional Albanian clothes to wear. The residents of Dečan knew that Arslan and his wife, my great-grandmother Fatime Reznici, were harboring Jews, but none of them ever informed the Nazi police patrolling the area. According to a journalist, Ibrahim Kadriu, quote, while the Nazis were looking everywhere for Jews and had already imprisoned 40 Jewish families in Mitrovica, 120 Jews in Pristina, and 30 in Prizren, the Reznici house served as a safe shelter and transfer point for Jews. End of quote. The transport of these families to Albania, as well as that of the Conforti, Natan, and Cohen families, all of which took place in 1943, was done with the help of my great-grandfather's Kosovar Albanian colleagues, Halim Spahiu, a merchant with contacts in the Albanian Chamber of Commerce, and Hasan Rema Zerza. Many of the Jewish families were also sent on to Italy with the additional help of Pashuk Biba, a merchant, whose brother Kolja was Albanian's Minister of the Interior. My great-grandfather and his colleagues were able to use their trading routes and contacts in the Balkans to secure safe passage for hundreds of Jews. I would like to mention one thing. There were 2 ways for helping and transporting Jews from Kosova to Albania, either by the main road from Kosova to Albania, which would be by crossing the border, either by the mountains. But when it was possible to travel by the main road, it was possible only by providing false documents. And the gentleman, Arif Alichkay, whose son Agim is today with us, and he is also going to say a few words, he provided the false documents as he was the secretary of the municipality of Dečan, in which he used his power to provide the false IDs in which he registered Jews that were coming as Bosnians, as mainly the Jews in the Balkans were speaking Serbo-Croatian language. They didn't know Albanian, so it was the easiest way to register them as Bosnians, and then they could go by the main road. And when that was not possible because of security, then they would be sent by the mountains. Dr. Abravanel survived the war working as a doctor in Manastir, the old city of Skopje, Macedonia, and my family kept in touch with him over the years. However, in 1963, tragedy struck when Skopje was hit by an earthquake, killing his daughter Reina and her husband, Dr. Salvatore Levi. My great-grandparents and grandfather immediately left for Skopje to attend the funeral and spend time with Dr. Abravanel and his wife Berta. As it turned out, the tragedy was too much for them to bear, and they told my family that they were planning to immigrate to Israel. Out of gratitude to my family for saving them during the war, the Abravanels offered their house to my great-grandparents, but they would not accept the offer and instead suggested that the Abravanels donate their home to the Red Cross. This would be their last meeting. Between 1943 and 1960, my family no longer had direct contact with most of the Jewish families that it had saved. Nevertheless, through Sami Mizrahi in Skopje, Macedonia, my family managed to get some information about the fate of the Cohen, Conforti, and Natan families. In 1960, Solomon Conforti came to visit my family, which had since moved to a new house in Pristina on a one-day visit from Greece. Solomon had a lovely reunion with my great-grandparents, Arslan and Fatima, who had traveled from Deccan for the occasion, my grandmother Sutkia, and other Reznici family members. At the request of Solomon Conforti, my family also invited Becir Castrati, the teacher who had taught their daughters while they were in hiding. At the end of October 2007, my grandfather Mustafa traveled to Israel to attend the recognition at Yad Vashem of the saving role that Albanians had played during the Holocaust. In Jerusalem, he had an emotional reunion with Rachel Shirley, Levi Drumer, the granddaughter of Dr. Haim Abravanel, who had saved his life as a teenager during the war. He told me that as soon as he and Shirley met, they embraced. They could not hold back their tears, and they spent an evening sharing their memories. Shirley told my grandfather about Haim and Berta's lives later years in Israel. 2 years earlier, in 2005, my grandfather and Giangulia Iliazi co-founded the Dr. Haim Abravanel Kosova Israel Friendship Association in Pristina. I am the organization's secretary. We have been able to identify at least 30 families in Kosova that provided shelter and safe passage for Jews. On March 17, 2009, Yad Vashem recognized Arslan Reznici and his family for their saving role during the Holocaust, the first Kosovar Albanian to receive the award Righteous Among Nations. Mustafa Reznici accepted the award in Kosova's capital, Pristina, on behalf of his father. 2 months later, on May 28, 2009, Mustafa died at the age of 85. My grandfather's experience during the Holocaust was one of the most formative in his life, and I will always remember his words about the role that his family played in saving Jews. No matter what the risk is to you and your family, you may never betray your promised word, Besa. Thank you very much.
Leka, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I'm now very happy to introduce Aga Milichkai. He was born and raised in Kosova. He's the owner of Kosova Tours, the leading travel agency in the New York tri-state area, specializing in the Balkans. For the past 25 years, Agam has served on the board of the Albanian American Civic League and Foundation. As you heard before from Leka, Agam's father, Arif Alichkai, played a very major role in getting Jews initially saved from the Nazis in Kosova across the border into Albania. It was actually only in 2006, when I began working with Mustafa and Leka Reznici, that I learned for the first time that Agam's father worked directly with Leka's great-grandfather, Arslan Reznici, in rescuing Jews. You're about to hear the story of his father's decision to rescue Jews and the reason, most important, for the belated revelation. Please give a warm welcome to a close friend and colleague of many years, Aga Milichkai.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here with us in this very important event. I would like to thank the organizers, of course, the leadership of Ron and Karen and Joe and Shirley DioGuardi. I am privileged to work with them on a very important issue, Albanians of Albanian nation, and also friendship between Jewish, Albanian, and American people. I will also would like to thank my wife, Sadeta Alichkai, who is here with us. She gives me strength. My story is simple. It connects to Leka's story, to his great-grandfather. My father, Arif Alichkai, and his great-grandfather, they were friends. And my father was the secretary, executive secretary of the municipality of Dechan. This is a town and a place where it's very close to the Albanian border. From Dechan to Albania, you have to pass really rough mountains. Arslan approached my father and told him, look, we have people, Jewish people to save, and I need your help to issue false documents. He did not hesitate. He did it with honor and pride. He always mentioned it to us when we were speaking about life and everything, but he never bragged about it. He never sought any recognition about it. He said, look, this was our duty. We protect our guests. We love our friends, especially. He told us, when I saw the pictures of these beautiful children and women and men, I said, why would someone want to kill them? Why? They were so innocent. So that was the motive behind all of the rescue. And that's not only his motive, that was the motive of Albanian nation. Of course, he had to destroy the files. He couldn't keep files because Germans would come and ask him if there are Jews in Dechan. He said, of course, no, of course, we will let you know if they come here, but nothing, no, we don't have Jews here. So he destroyed everything, the files, so that's why we cannot document for, the work that he did at that time. And I have to say this, that many other Albanians, they helped Arslan Reznici, Leka's great-grandfather, and my father, but we know some of them. I think the number is up to 30 that we know that helped. But it can be in hundreds. It's not only 3 people. This was an organized effort later on. First started as individually, but then it got so organized. So we may never know their names. But I can say, make a point here. The Albanian nation, as a nation, stood to German Nazis and said, no. No, we are not giving up our Jewish brothers and sisters. We are not, and we did not. So that was the most important point that I want to make. I can say here also that Albanian nation as well suffered, not in the scale that Jewish people suffered, but we suffered for centuries, 500 of Ottoman Empire, and 100 years of Serbian occupation, terrorism, even genocide, of course in a smaller scale, but we suffered a lot. So that was another thing that connected us. It does connect us to the Jewish people, of course. And this happened, as we know, in 1943, that is 74 years ago. But this act is important even today. It is important to send a message to the world, a message of peace, of friendship, of tolerance, religious, ethnic tolerance. We need to live side by side and judge one another not by religion or ethnicity, but judge if somebody is good or is bad. So let the good people bring together. And this message should be sent to the world from us. It's being sent even today, a message of peace and friendship. I can only say at the end, thank you again. May God bless Jewish, American, and Albanian people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agim, for that passionate presentation. Shirley and I have known your family for years. I remember meeting your father on many occasions when you brought him here. I mean, you talk about how Albanians live today. His family, brothers, had to disperse, and he has 3 or 4 brothers living in Oslo, Norway, very successful. And Albanians survive today, as in Kosova, as in Albania, with remittances. There is very little economy and so much corruption. So they still suffer today. This is not yet a finished deal. So with that, let me now introduce you to another young man, Fatan Bislimi, who we met when he called me out of the blue. He was in the United States at the time. His family was one of the families, maybe 1 million people. Can you imagine Slobodan Milosevic, the new age Hitler? Thank God I was in Congress at the time he surfaced in 1987. He became the head of the Communist Party of Serbia, the head of the Serbian government, and I was then educated very quickly about who this Nazi-like character was. He was the New Age Hitler. What he did during those Balkan wars, starting with Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, and we knew, Shirley and I, that his biggest prize would be Kosova, and there would be an immense genocide if we didn't step up our activities. And did we do that with key people like Henry Hyde, like Joe Biden, Tom Lantos, Ben Gilman, you name it. We didn't go to average congressmen. We went to the chairman, and we testified. You'll see this all. Get Shirley's card. You'll see the website of the Albanian American Civic League, and you'll see over 300 YouTube videos. And look at the passion that Shirley and I had with the people we brought in to convince the Congress, because they had no real knowledge of what was going on, and the Serbs were getting away literally with murder and almost genocide. Thank God we caught them just in time, but 10,000 Albanians, approximately 10,000 in Kosova, were killed. But Fatan's family was part of that 1 million people that Slobodan Milosevic drove out of Kosova. They were in camps in Macedonia. He thought his family was dead. He ended up coming here, and he was, bereft, and somehow felt he had to do something for his people. Calls me when he sees our website and introduces himself and says, I'd like to do something for my people, and I'm here at Texas Lutheran University. I've had sponsors. I'm doing very well. I mean, here's a gentleman who was taking computer science and math, straight A student, and ends up going to Harvard with a scholarship. We thought a full scholarship. Didn't make it, but Shirley and I helped him, made sure that he got through Harvard. He has a master's degree from Harvard. He is now working on his PhD from Edmonton University in Alberta, where his wife's family was, but he has decided not to make his life easy. He's decided to move back, and he is now in Jalan, Kosova, with his family, and it's very difficult for him to be there. We help him financially so he could stay there, because he is the future, along with Leka and others, educated young Albanians, to get rid of these corrupted regimes. We have to make sure they go back there, that they don't stay here, where it could be easy for him. So with that, Fatan, you volunteered to do so many things. He gave several conferences in Europe for the Albanians of Kosova and Albania, one in Prague in 2003, one in Belgium. Was out of 50 people, the only Albanian awarded first prize in both cases. He's an incredible young man that works very hard, and he came here to be with you today. Come, Fatan.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here today. I think this is a very important gathering in memory of those who have perished during the Holocaust, as well as in honor of those who, at the risk of their own lives, have done whatever they could to save Jews during the history's darkest days in Europe. So the story of the Albanian rescue of Jews is a story of the Albanian people's own struggle for survival, for freedom, and for peace. For centuries, it is a story of their commitment to their own values and virtues. The story of the Albanian tradition of generosity and righteousness, especially towards friends, guests, and those in need. So this story, I believe, resonates now more than ever before, especially in these turbulent times that we live today. And given the fact that the Yad Vashem has strict rules on how to recognize rescuers, which requires that a rescuer and a survivor are alive to confirm the details of the rescue, a lot of the Albanian families from Kosova, Albania, and the rest of the Albanian lands in the Balkans will not have the opportunity to be recognized. Not that they did anything to be recognized, as was said previously, but to honor that effort, to honor that commitment, we have decided to build a wall of honor, which is a project jointly done by the Albanian American Foundation under the leadership of Joe and Shirley, in close cooperation with the Kosova-Israel Friendship Society under the leadership of Lekar Esnici. And this wall eventually, the wall of honor that we're working on, will be built in Pristina, the capital city of Europe's youngest and newest country called Kosova. We're especially thankful for their support to Ron and Karen Retner, not only for this project, but for all they have done so far in making the story of the Albanian rescue of Jews known as widely as possible. However, the purpose of this wall will be fourfold. This wall of honor will be the beacon and the bearer of this fourfold message that includes tolerance, love, peace, and life. And we hope that the wall of honor that we want to build there will disperse this message across the globe to all peoples, all nations, regardless of their beliefs, regardless of their ethnicity, race, or faith. If America was woken up, educated, and inspired by the four freedoms of FDR during the World War II, I believe the Wall of Honor in Pristina, Kosova, which will honor by name those Kosovar Albanian families that helped save Jews, will send this fourfold message of tolerance, love, peace, and life to the world. And there is a reason why I chose these four messages. Well, I believe we can't love if we're not tolerant. We all are different, and we all are to look and find among ourselves what unites us as opposed to what divides us. And I think that's the basic notion of tolerance. But we can't ensure peace without love, as that would really be a mere lack of conflict. We can't have a fulfilled life if we don't have peace, as a life lived unfulfilled is one merely lived. Therefore, we envision this wall of honor as a beacon of this fourfold message in the heart of Europe, in the capital of Kosova, and we will make sure that this memorial will be bold, sensitive, and as unique as the story of the Albanian rescue of Jews is. And lastly, I'm thrilled to announce that we have already gotten the full support from the mayor of Pristina for this project, who is willing to donate a prime piece of property in the capital city so that this wall of honor will be built. Now I invite you to watch a short clip from a speech given by Johanna Neumann, a German Jew who was rescued by Albanians during World War II. This is a clip from the speech she gave at the 100th anniversary of Albanian independence, which the Albanian American Civic League celebrated in Washington, D.C. in 2012.
My heartfelt thanks to all the Albanian people, that goes without saying. I have spoken in many places to many different groups, children, adults, Albanian groups in Germany, you name it. And the one thing that I always have to say is, I end my speech always by saying our Talmud teaches that if you save one human life, it is as though you save a whole world. I'm the mother of 4 children, the grandmother of 14 children, and the great-grandmother of 9 with 3 more on the way. This would not have been the case if it hadn't been for the good Albanian people who saved us. This is not simply saying, saved us. We were not refugees in their eyes. We were guests. That's how we were treated. This is how they treated us. We had Muslim friends, we had some Christian friends. Muslim community took us with them to their mosque, invited us for their Ramadan, etc., etc. We were not ever made to feel that we were foreigners. And the big thing really is the sacrifice, the danger into which these Albanian friends put their lives cannot be estimated in today's world. If any German would have realized that Albanian families were hiding Jews in their home, the entire family would have been shot on the spot. You can trust me. I have seen a whole house with people in it being blown up by the Germans because one partisan was hidden in that house, let alone if they would have discovered that Jews were being hidden in anybody's home. So my thanks to the Albanian people is endless, and I love to talk about it because not enough is being said, not enough is known about it, and there were very few such courageous and wonderful people as the Albanian people. So I love to talk about it. Thank you very much.
I'm Rabbi David Weiner, the spiritual leader of Knesset Israel in Pittsfield. And before we continue, I just want to take another opportunity to thank our guests for telling this amazing and inspiring story. At this point, we're going to take just a few minutes for some questions and answers, followed by a brief commemorative service. And then everyone will have an opportunity to speak with our presenters and view Lekka's exhibit in the crane room upstairs during the reception. Also on display there will be projects from the students from Clarksburg Middle School on the theme of righteous Gentiles. Before I open the floor a little bit for questions, I'd love to offer everyone in the room an opportunity to reflect on what we've just heard. I found several aspects of these stories tremendously moving. For me, it's just amazing to contemplate what it means to really live for eternal, enduring values, to live by them, to live for them, and to put your life on the line for them. The power in that it just bowls me over. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. I'll try to repeat the question back, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much. So the question was why our country is spelled Kosova and not Kosovo. The O is very important, why it should not be used. Because Kosovo, for us, that O in the end represents oppression. Because it is the name that the Serbian occupation during that time was called our country. So the majority population, the Albanians, that are over 90% in Kosova, we call our country Kosova, so that's why it should be that. Because O is oppression. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there plans to bring this presentation to larger audiences, Boston, New York, etc.?
Absolutely. People have to hear this wonderful story. And this has been 2 years in the works. It's not easy for people like Ron and Karen and others who are basically doing this of their own free will without much organization except the Albanian American Civic League and Foundation, which is not a well-endowed thing. We kind of, limp along and raise the money when we need it. But this now is being filmed by a professional videographer. We've known Scott Cohen for years. He's here with his wife, Kim, and he's donating his time because we're going to put this together in a way that is so professional, put it on the internet, put it on certainly our websites and whatnot, and still get this out. So from here, we will encourage our Jewish brothers and sisters to take this message and replicate it. And if they need us there, we would love to be there in front of large crowds to make sure they understand the importance of this. And as Ron said, this is not just for the past, this is for the future. We need to know this in order to make an example of how to prevent genocide in the future. You would have thought this would not even be a thought today, but look at it. After all, World War II is over, we're still dealing with genocide around the world. Thank you.
We have time for one more question, please, ma'am. Is there a religious correlation among Albanians who helped or did not help?
No, thank you very much for the question. No, as it was mentioned, the first identity for Albanians, I mean, it's the ethnicity. So if you would ask an Albanian, what are you? He would say all the time that he's an Albanian. But if you specifically would ask him or her, what is your religion? Then he would say, well, I'm a Muslim, or well, I'm a Catholic, because it is a very personal thing for which it doesn't matter for us. So it is not an Albanian, it is not, how to say, this gesture, this, what they did was not based on the core of the religion, but it was on the traditional Albanian besa, which is the highest level of the promise, in which, as I mentioned, my grandfather, when he told me, no matter what happens to you or to your family, all the risk of them, you may never betray the given word besa. So that's what they did. They gave to the Jews the besa. So they would sacrifice everything, but not to betray the given word, and the Jew would be not to be discovered. Thank you.
6 months ago, if you would have told me the Albanians would say, I would have said you're out of your mind. But this was just beyond belief. My father lost his entire family in the Holocaust. I wish they would have been able to get to Albania. They'd all be alive today. It was the most incredible story. I really think it needs to be told all over the world.